All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. We've covered a few political things on the channel recently, as well as talking about some other things, such as, the CIA, the New World Order, and a bunch of ways that all of them could be interconnected. But it's been a while since we just got back into discussing some mysteries and just true crime events in general. And today we're going to be discussing one of the most famous, yet still baffling cases in American true crime history, and that's the case of the boy in the box. Now, this one is one that I first found out about on America's Most Wanted, watching it as a kid. And I mentioned that America's Most Wanted was one of the things that pulled me into true crime. I mean, I talked about the case of Margaret Rudin on this channel, which should really be referred to as the death of Ron Rudin. Margaret Rudin, of course, murdered her husband, and, it was America's Most Wanted that pulled me into that for a while. But the Zodiac Killer was also something that I learned about from America's Most Wanted. It's definitely been influential on me as a person, watching John Walsh on Saturday nights as I did. But the thing is, though, with the boy in the box, this is an incident that happened on February 25th, 1957, and they actually give the date that it aired on America's Most Wanted, October 3rd, 1998. I was one of the people watching that at the time. I mean, I didn't remember the exact date. They got it written down here. And it's like countless people saw this on the same show. And it just revolutionized the search to find out about this particular case. So, I mean, media can be very helpful in these things. And it's also glad to know that, we're all kind of coming together around these things for a common good. And it is to try and get an answer to this mystery. But, it's like there's some things that are rather tragic with this particular one because when I was watching that America's Most Wanted show, they introduced it by saying, a case that has been unsolved for 41 years. Remember, happened in 1957. I saw the program in 1998, and we got, just doing a Google search, it says unsolved for 62 years. It's 2019 right now. 62 years have gone by, and we are still not any closer to getting an answer about the boy in the box mystery. To give kind of the most basic introduction they have is that the boy in the box is the name given to an unidentified murder victim, 4 to 5 years old, whose naked, battered body was found in the Fox Chase section of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's the intro that absolutely everyone has copied and pasted all over the internet. It says here 4 to 5, but in some accounts they actually say 3 to 7, and there's some very specific reasons for that. Okay, so we got a boy that's found in a box. The box was actually something that was used for a bassinet, like a baby's bassinet, and he was wrapped in a plaid blanket. He was originally found by a guy who was setting traps for muskrats, and it was actually illegal to do that type of trapping. And he came across, the body in the box, and he didn't want to say anything to the authorities because he was afraid that they would confiscate his traps and that he would get into legal trouble. The second person that found the boy in the box was what I very clearly remembered from America's Most Wanted. A guy is spying on some girls at a nearby school, and he is kind of like doesn't want to get caught. He doesn't want them to know about it. It says in one account that he chased a rabbit into the woods and then he found the boy in the box. But what I remembered on the show was he's spying on the girls, and then one of them shouts back, "Go away, you pervert!" And then he took off running because one of the girls had shouted at him and saw him spying on them. And he discovered the boy in the box. And once again, he was very hesitant to come in. And I believe it was the radio coverage about a different case and the death of Mary Jane Barker, which was a girl who disappeared, and they had kind of a high-profile disappearance case going on just southeast of Philadelphia. It was actually, though, on the New Jersey side. I almost thought that all of these were both in Philadelphia, but Mary Jane Barker was in New Jersey, and the boy in the box took place in Philadelphia. All right, so he's found in a box, most likely malnourished, naked, wrapped in a blanket. His hair had been very unprofessionally cut. All parties agree that this little boy was found with his hair cut post mortem. Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody cut the hair of a naked dead boy? The only thing that I could think of that would come to mind would be that it's to conceal his identity, just so that neighbors wouldn't think about it. If they saw a photo of the boy. And I admit, though, watching that as a kid, I really thought the photos of the boy in the box were very gruesome. It's like they're showing you the photos of this dead body that's been beaten. He died from blunt force trauma, and it's like they show you, like the face of a beaten, dead, murdered young boy who was not too much younger than I was at the time, watching that as a kid. And the thing is, that's just what most people think happened. They were trying to conceal his identity in some way that not only would possible neighbors, recognize him if he had his hair much longer and neatly, or just groomed the way it would have normally been, or just his natural appearance. Even if he had been ruffled up a bit, they still would have recognized him. What about photographs? What about any sort of photographic material that would have had, a picture of him? People could recognize that. If they cut his hair post-mortem, they would believe that they could, conceal his identity. It's gone unsolved for 62 years. Maybe there's something to that. One of the things, though, is you got to stay with me for a second, because I thought that the Wikipedia page on this actually did an interesting job of presenting the theories. Normally, the Wikipedia page doesn't do that too well. Sometimes they give the theories in a very general way, but it's like they just laid it straight out about some of the possible things that could have happened to this boy. But you see, the thing is, though, one of the biggest ones that I would like to talk about right now is a woman who came forward, and she was known as Martha, or M. And first, I would say, I've done reading on several articles, several websites. I've been trying to stay away from YouTube on this one. Normally I watch the documentaries, but I think it's going to be kind of an interesting approach if we go for more of the print material sources and more of the written sources. I also really try to avoid Reddit when I'm preparing stuff or just thinking about cases, because I find the Reddit things can send you off on wild goose chases, and they can sort of put false leads around. I really just try to look at some of the kind of basic material. One of the theories, though, is that there was this woman named Martha, also going just by the letter M, and she claimed that she knew who the boy was, that he had been living in her basement. He had some sort of mental disability, and he was abused by her mother. And the thing is, though, that he vomited one night. He was given baked beans for dinner. He vomited, and the mother just lost it. Once again, she's someone who regularly abused him, so she just beat him senseless, and then put the body into kind of the bathtub, and he passed away in the bathtub. And that's very important, because he was kind of, his fingers had pruned up like he had been in the water for a while, so that's very normal. That's a very big detail. And this is going to sound kind of weird, but a forensic artist created a photo, an artist rendition. It's an artist rendition picture. We shouldn't say a photo. Artist rendition picture of what he believed the boy in the box would have looked like normally, with the uncut hair. And the first time I looked at that photo, I thought, that looks like some kid who has some type of mental disability. And, the thing is, I'm like, I didn't think I was going to say that on the channel, because I'm like, that's too much to assume about someone. Just looking at an artist's rendition's image of somebody, to assume that they have a mental disability. I wouldn't say that out loud, except for the fact that it's right here in this theory put forward by this person, M. That's one of the things that was going on. That's why he was kept in the basement of their house for 2.5 years. And it's like, it sounded somewhat plausible. It's like he was murdered, in other words. They cut his hair post-mortem, and the woman, Martha and her mother carried the body to the forest. An interesting thing about this is they also discarded his personal items throughout the forest. They found like a pair of shoes that had been were very clean but in a muddy area. They discarded his personal items out there, in short, trying to erase traces of them from his life. Why isn't that case open and shut? Well, the person M also had her own kind of theory. She had her own kind of issues with mental illness, and mental illness is a big thing going on with this case. I mean, it sounds like you're just going to find it mental issues all over the map. Every single person involved has mental issues. Okay, so they couldn't corroborate her story. The neighbors also said that they had no knowledge there was a young boy living in that house. Nothing could come about of that. But I'm like, if he were in the basement for 2.5 years, I mean, it depends on when they moved in. How would they be able to? How would they be able to, kind of, sort of even have any knowledge about this? I mean, maybe a kid that they would have seen 2.5 years ago. Would they necessarily remember him? And an interesting thing that that Martha states about this is he was born in 1954. And the thing is, though, that would only put him at 3 years old as opposed to 7, the oldest estimate that he could have been 7. But another thing is, he was also illegally purchased. And they did do some things like that. In one of the towns I used to live in, they had this like general store that's kind of like a museum, traditional stuff. It's like and it's a general store / museum. And one of the things that they used to have in there was kind of an old plaque of just that had a card on it that said "Girl for sale, $400," and give some features about her. People used to just sell other people. And in 1954 to 57, I could see that happening. But, it's like, the thing is, it sounds kind of implausible, but at the same time, it answers all the questions. When I read about this one, I was like, this really answered all of the questions. But, they weren't able to corroborate anything associated with her story. It's just kind of, very, very speculative. And let's not kid ourselves. People do make stuff up and compose things. I mean, we get the stuff with the Zodiac Killer. Multiple confessions in the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Multiple confessions. It's like, not to mention the JonBenet Ramsey case. I mean, people have confessed to that. It's just so many things, and so many times, people come forward with information and theories and kind of their own story about how they know what happened in this, but they aren't able to kind of give the hard evidence to support their claim, or they're just fabricating it for a variety of reasons. The next thing we have is the foster home theory, and that is one where it concerns a foster home that was located approximately 1.5 miles from the site of the body. In 1960, Remington Bristow, an employee of the medical examiner's office who doggedly pursued the case until his death in 1993, contacted a New Jersey psychic who took him to the house. I'm going to skip over that. And what they sort of learned is that there was a bassinet at the house that was very similar to one that would have likely been used in the bassinet box. They had plaid blankets at that foster home, which was very likely something that was used, very likely to be the same type of material. But they got this kind of investigator, Remington Bristow. What did he really learn? He sort of believed that the boy belonged to the stepdaughter of the man who ran the foster home, and they disposed of his body so the stepdaughter would not be exposed as an unwed mother. And he believed that the boy's death may have been an accident. In short, I believe, though, that this is actually kind of a more complicated theory than that. From some of the other articles I had been reading, he had a different wife, and it's like the stepdaughter was from a previous marriage, and they did have a foster home where they're taking in kids. So he's not, it's a stepdaughter. She was from a previous marriage. He was married, and they eventually, after the wife died, his wife dies, right? Then he goes on to marry his stepdaughter. This guy here, and his name is, let's see, oh crap, it's just lost the name of it there. And anyway, the guy who was running the foster home, anyway, he is someone who became a widower and married a stepdaughter. So one of the things that I think this is, he could have impregnated the stepdaughter, and then his wife lost control and one night just beat up the boy. But the thing is, you got to look at one thing. He's at least 3 years old as 7 years old. I mean, is that kid really living in the house for 3 years and the wife hasn't figured out that the husband is sleeping with the stepdaughter and they've, had that pregnancy and all that? I mean, that's very hard to believe. So this theory is actually not as kind of, fitting like a glove as they're making it seem in this little thing here. You really got to, read some of the other material out there to get a little bit deeper. And another thing, though, is it doesn't necessarily have to be this unwed mother theory. It could very simply be what they're kind of just saying, but this detective Remington Bristow is saying, that he got someone pregnant and they had the kid out of wedlock. One thing I thought about was, based on the way that the boy was found with like the pruned fingers, when they said accident, I thought, could he have been in kind of a bathtub and that he was just type of, some accident happened where the parents started hitting him and it got out of control. One of the theories, though, in the JonBenet Ramsey case, the Patsy Ramsey murder theory, is that the mother actually pushed her daughter's head into the faucet of the bathtub. Could something like that have happened here? I think that's, if you're going to say something like that, it'd have to be much more than just something simple of that. It would have to be very, very kind of something building up to that, because in other accounts, the boy had bruises from head to toe, like he was beaten. So it would have to be some sort of beating, or maybe if you would say something like he fell down the stairs and then they put him in the bathtub for some reason. I don't know why. That's just kind of talking extemporaneously, because if you were to do that, of course, it would make the wounds worse. But the thing is, though, I found that the story about the woman M who coming forward sounded much more plausible. We have countless other things out there. They thought he could have possibly been a missing boy from New York who had been kidnapped or something like that. And definitely there are things like that, kidnappings and abductions. The thing, though, is when you're going to be looking at a case like this, it took me a long time to even begin to think about anything associated with the smallest possible theory. Normally, after doing a couple of these true crime uploads, you kind of look at the thing and then you start to think a little bit and you're like, now wait a second, maybe this is what happened. It took some serious time before I could even begin to think about what could have happened to the boy in the box, even going down any possible road. But the issue is, though, this is a kid who, really lost his life in a very tragic way, and it's highly possible that he had some issues with mental illness, and we mentioned that everybody in the story has mental illness. The stepdaughter as well, in the case of the case of the kind of foster home, the man who had the affair with his stepdaughter, she also had some mental issues as well, so it's like they don't necessarily know who to believe. It's very difficult to find any sort of credible person in this story. I definitely felt that the theory from the woman M made a little bit more sense. On America's Most Wanted 20 years ago, they had the artist also compose a picture. It was a bust of what the father of the boy in the box would have most likely looked like. I saw painful, striking similarities to my grandfather. That's another thing that I remembered. And someone else actually, said that they saw, they thought that the person there looked exactly like their father. I was reading another article about that. And it's hard. It's really hard, It's like you kind of got some middle-aged, even a slightly elderly Caucasian man. I just really remember that as a kid. I never knew my grandfather personally, just from the photographs. And really from the boy in the box, I also saw a lot of my grandfather in him. But, it's like, he's from Pennsylvania. My family's from West Virginia. It's not too far off when you think about how immigration would have happened in different families growing up. Probably have some sort of, heritage that is rather similar. But the thing is, it's like we I mean, it's a little bit difficult when you have such few possibilities. They aren't even necessarily sure that he was a Philadelphia native. Once again, he could have been kidnapped or abducted, but what do you think about any of the theories that we put forward? What do you think about anything that we have said? Do you think that the M theory has any possibility? Do you think that the foster home theory has more possibility? What do you have to say? I would love to hear from you, and until next time.